Thanks a lot for the invitation. And before we start with the presentation and slides, let's have a look and listen to a short video explaining our problem statement and then actually the end result of what I will talk about, how and what we actually do to achieve that. Ton, bitte.
What if your home could return to that rhythm? New technologies are leading us back to live with the wind, to dance in the sunlight, to energy that's not just clean, but free. 4 years ago, we set out with a vision. Today, over 100,000 homes are powered by the Earth's rhythm. Together, we're building a future where energy is not owned, but shared, for everyone and forever. Our Earth has a heartbeat. Are you ready to tune in?
So to be able to sync with that rhythm of wind and sun in households, there's a lot of data needed and also a lot of decisions needed to do that. And that's what I'm going to talk about in my presentation. Yes, from smart home to smart grids and how with decentralized intelligence we managed to go that way. So the rhythm of wind and sun that the video was talking about, it actually has an imprint on our energy price. And with the more and more renewables that we integrate into our grids, you can see how that scales on the left-hand slide, the more that imprint of wind and sun on the energy price becomes visible on the daily energy exchange in the price structures. And you can see that on the right, and there's a typical pattern actually of that you can predict pretty well, which is at night when there is wind, electricity becomes pretty cheap, a lot of times even at a negative price. So actually for consumers would get paid if they would have access to that price. And the same during daytime, when there's a lot of sun, the prices go down for electricity because there's even sometimes an overload of sun. So what we do with our solutions is actually managing those things together with the households to make sure that our customers, the household owners, always have the cheapest and cleanest electricity. And that actually then on the other hand side also helps to integrate more renewables into the grid because they get used when they are there. And we try to prevent using energy when there's no renewable energy in the grid. So how do we do that? We actually follow a master plan that finishes with what I will be talking about in my presentation, but it actually started with our first chapter, which was actually acquiring installation companies and getting them into one bigger company that can actually install across Germany first, but also by now in 7 different countries from Finland to Australia to bring our mission really to life for our customers. So the first step was to build that one-stop shop where a customer can go and electrify their home. Get a heat pump, EV charger, climate systems, PV panels, a battery, and get that home electrified with an installer from 1,5 Grad that will come and do the installations. Then the second chapter of our journey is the virtual assembly line. Because just by buying that, there is still a lot of things to do to get it up in order and in a way that later on with IoT technology, everything gets connected and optimized, and you also have all the data to take the right decisions for the customer. So step 2 actually is the digitalization of the installation business that we did. So all that companies, more than 70 that we acquired, we integrated into the same IT infrastructure, the same setup, and started applying intelligence. And obviously also already there, we use different AI solutions to make things more efficient. For example, planning which installers do go where by optimizing their routes in their daily planning and different things. However, everything that we do in the end comes with the goal to, once the installation is finished, in the most efficient way, obviously, with the best resources, so we can do most installations, we connect all the different devices that the customer has with our Heartbeat AI system and start optimizing them in the optimal way to achieve what you have seen in the video before, for our customers to live in the rhythm of wind and sun. Today we have 500 megawatts of installed capacity across Europe connected to our system. So that's quite a number of flexibility actually that you can steer, and that not only helps our customers, but in the end also helps to flexibilize the grid, because you can not only use it for the customers to lower their electricity, but also can offer flexibility to that on different markets to stabilize the grid, for example. We have more than 4.8 million optimization decisions a day that we do for those customers. More than 300,000 assets actually connected to the platform that can be steered. And there are approximately 200 or more than 200 engineers in my team that work on developing those solutions. And that, in the end, all has the goal to automate and optimize that decision taking. Because if you imagine there's 3.6 million decisions to take, that's nothing where a customer anymore can sit at home and say, okay, looking at the electricity price forecast, it would probably be a good idea if I reschedule my heat pump to start a little bit later tomorrow morning to heat the water, because then the price will be cheaper. You can do that, and our Swedish customers actually have been used to do that for quite some time. So there were electricity price forecasts, or are still in the weather forecast in Sweden. And then customers try to adapt their washing machines and different things. But in the end, what you want from an energy management system in your home is somebody to take over that responsibility, actually know when the sun will be shining in your place. So when there will be electricity generated on your roof even, you want the system to know what the price for our grid consumption is, and when the lowest point is, and when actually the highest point is, to not consume anything. And you want the system to know what your consumption patterns usually look like, so that your battery has the best state of charge actually to bring you through the day on the best electricity price. So there's a lot of data involved into that from different categories. So on the one hand side, there is data from asset types. So you can imagine all the assets in the customer household that we connect. So the heat pump, the EV, the battery, the PV panel. We receive 2-second data of those assets in live. And we also learn with our models. So we deploy a lot of machine learning models to predict how that will look like for the next hour, for the next day, even for the next minute, to take the best decision for that customer. But it not only works on data from the assets alone, but also obviously on data from the weather, I mentioned that already, and from the status of the grid. So if you look into our Swedish customers, for example, there is something called frequency containment reserve. When the grid deviates from its usual state, there's actually a signal sent so that assets start supporting the grid to get back to its normal state. Also, that's a data point that we then collect, we forecast, so that we know at what stage actually our batteries should be at a certain point in time, so we could help the grid to stabilize again. Then obviously, customers have preferences as well. Now I'm talking about it like we are steering a lot of assets, but customers probably don't want me to decide the heat pump to start 2 hours later, because that's only when the sun comes out, but then there is no warm water in the morning, or the house is not warmed up. So there's a lot of predictions also on customer behavior that we do with our models to actually know, okay, but the customer still would want most of the days to start very early, so we need to charge a battery to then from the battery power the heat pump, because that's a cheaper opportunity than importing at the point in time, 8 o'clock in the morning, when everybody gets up and wants electricity, or 7 o'clock. The heat pump, so that we pre-charge the battery overnight when there's actually free electricity from wind, for example, and save that in the battery, and then start powering the heat pump in the morning, just until the time when the sun comes out and the customer produces electricity from their own roof again. Then obviously that all comes together with the prices on the energy market that got already mentioned. So there's a price tag to it. There's even a lot of different energy markets. So depending on whether you buy a day in ahead or even longer term, or whether you optimize in a 15-minute frame, there's different energy markets. So all those impacts of the different energy markets need to get taken into account and then brought also into the optimization model to actually know the best points in time to buy on those energy markets. And then if you imagine again the 200,000 or 300,000 assets that we have, all of that needs to be brought together and then be traded basically at volume for the customers, because you won't buy electricity for one home alone, but actually for the overall pool, let's say, of homes and customers that you have in your business. So Heartbeat AI, and what you see in the middle is a bit that's our symbol for Heartbeat AI. In the end, is not only a decentral device that decentrally collects the data, but then obviously we have a whole infrastructure and backend setup where that gets transmitted to. And then in the end, the optimal schedule for that customer gets brought back to the device, and decisions in real time are taken on site to be sure that whenever there's no internet connection or anything, there's still the best opportunity happening for the customer on site again. In the end, when you look into the market and what the current opportunities in that market are, there's also many companies that try to do it for a specific asset category or just for a specific use case, let's say. So you can find companies that try to optimize your EV only. Then they offer you a tariff for your EV, for example, and only steer the EV. And that's a great progress already when it comes to energy transition. However, if you don't bring all the assets into one optimization and into one forecasting model and into one steering, then it will not be the optimal outcome for the customer home, because that will mean, okay, you only know the EV needs to charge at night to steer that, but the heat pump still does whatever it wants, and maybe consumes at the wrong point in time. Or if you only optimize the PV with the battery, and whenever there is PV production that you don't use, you store it in the battery, then maybe at a later point in time there are negative prices. You won't get any money back from feeding into the grid, but your battery is already full because the first thing the PV did was charging the battery. So in the end, it only works if you take all the devices into account that the customer has, or at least all the steerable devices, and predict the rest, and at the same time look at all the different markets and also the grid and bring that together in one setup and optimization. So just to bring it a bit more visual on what that actually means, on what we change for the customer. This is actually a price curve, hourly, that's the standard market where you can trade on, of an electricity price on a certain day. So you can see that midday, I talked about that a lot, PV production happens, prices are even below zero for our customers, because we offer a tariff that's really just bundled basically to that price curve. And then you see at night it's also pretty cheap, so only closely below zero. Also to give you just an indication, if you don't know what you pay for your electricity, it's usually like 30, 35, in some regions even 40 cents per kilowatt hour, while there it's -3 at certain points in time, right? So there's a big variation and a big opportunity in that. However, customers usually, and that's how the price curve comes up, consume when the prices are high, because the prices are high because that's when consumption happens, and not necessarily when the prices are low, midday when there's a lot of PV, because that's when not everybody consumes, that's not at home, or typically evening high of prices, everybody comes home, then starts cooking, starts washing, starts doing different things, even starts charging the EV. So evening price peak is also something customers do usually walk into when they are on dynamic tariffs. So what then the outcome of what we do to the customers are, so just the curve that's a little bit shaped is the electricity price. The other one is the typical consumption curve of a household. What we do with our system is we really shift the loads of the customer with the help of machine learning, with the help of AI, to the right points in time when the prices are low. So you can see in the new curve that basically happens that we pre-charge batteries at the points in time where it's really cheap, and then feed the household again at the points in time. So battery state of charge in violet going down when there's a high price, so that the customer doesn't need to consume from the grid during that price point. And everything we do in the end, and that's then the magic kind of the product that we are offering, is brought into one price for the customer. So it's the first time that in the end, every of our customers has a particular electricity price, so an individual electricity price that they pay and they can see in our application for the electricity they consume. In that example, it's over a 30-day period, even a negative one, that's managed by consuming from the grid at negative prices and also from the PV panel that's on the customer roof. And the last step then of helping our customers to understand what we do is actually explaining back, also with the help of AI, what we have done. Because actually customers might wonder, why am I plugging in my EV when I come home and then it doesn't start charging? And then we use also language models to explain back to the customers that this happened because there was a decision taken that you will probably not leave before 7 o'clock tomorrow morning, and then the best point in time to charge will be later during the night when there will be wind and a cheap electricity price again. So we round up all the decisions that we take for our customers with explaining back to them why we do certain things, so they can understand what happens. And obviously I didn't mention that before, but they can also change things and say, okay, thank you, but for today I want to opt out. I will just, today I want to drive at 3 o'clock at night, I want to go on holiday, please start right away. You took a wrong assumption basically, and then they can interact with the system and change what we do.